Minister Philpott, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here in Ottawa today. What needs to be the outcome of this two-day conference, in your opinion, to make this a success?
Well, this is a really important gathering, and we have to come out of this meeting with concrete steps and commitments. So I know as a federal government, we're coming to the meeting prepared to make firm, concrete commitments as to what we will do, we believe some of our next steps are in terms of a complete reform of child welfare as it relates to Indigenous children. And I'm certainly hoping that other partners are coming to the table also prepared to acknowledge the solutions and commit to doing the work necessary to change the system.
Earlier today, the provincial and territorial ministers put out a joint release saying that, and calling on the federal government to provide new funding for all of this. Is that something that you're going to be committing to this week?
Absolutely. I, in fact, already announced at the Special Chiefs Assembly in December that we would be committing additional funding. It will come out in Budget 2018 in terms of what the exact number is, but we have acknowledged that there are still gaps that exist. Some of those gaps are the work that we need to do to fully implement the orders of the Human Rights Tribunal, and we're going to come to the meeting. I will reiterate my commitment to fully implement those orders and to make sure that the funding is there that's appropriate.
You mentioned the ruling, and this meeting's falling on the anniversary of that ruling, and yet we've seen the federal government fail to comply there and fight this in the courts. Is something going to change there?
Well, I don't think we're fighting anything. I think we're working with partners, and in fact I'm working very actively with the partners who are parties to the tribunal, the First Nations Caring Society, as well as the Assembly of First Nations and the other parties, and working quite directly with all of the leaders of those organizations. I've made it very clear to them that we want to achieve full compliance. We're literally going through order by order to make sure that we get the work done, including the funding that's there. It's all about collaboration. It's about focusing on the children, changing the system, investing in prevention, and we have a full commitment of our government to achieve compliance.
For some time now, we've been hearing about Indigenous women and recently again having their children having birth in secret. What does that tell you about this system?
You know what, it breaks my heart when I hear those kinds of stories, because it just speaks to the policies clearly not being correct when a woman has to hide away to give birth for fear that her child will be taken from her. It speaks to a system that doesn't acknowledge the necessity and importance of families being kept together, of recognizing the role of culture, the role of family, and needing to find ways that those family connections will be prioritized, and that in fact if there are challenges or reasons why a child might be apprehended, then let's address those causes. Let's address the poverty or the housing issue or the health issue that the parents might be facing, and find a way that we can support those families and support those parents so that they can keep their children with them.
Minister, we've been hearing in Yellowknife this week, where the National Inquiry is some testimony there from family members who are talking about the impact of the child welfare system. Do you see a link between those two?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. The data that we do have suggests that if you look at missing persons in this country, that children who grew up in foster care are heavily overrepresented amongst missing persons. Certainly that's the data that we've seen from Manitoba, for example. And there is a distinct link between those, and so that certainly emphasizes again the importance of really overhauling the approach and making sure that we get kids back with their families and hopefully avoid these very high apprehension rates that currently exist.
Well, Minister, we look forward to seeing what comes out of the meetings this week, and we thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.